So the year 2022, another year, another chapter approved, and 2 more books to add to my ever-growing computer monitor screen stand of outdated rulebooks. I'm all about upcycling. I'll take a look at the changes the new chapter approved and of course apply an Astra Militarum overlay. I've managed to play a few of the missions and I'm also preparing for the international team tournament next weekend at Northampton. So studying the missions to give me a fighting chance of possibly winning some of the games. If you'll be there next weekend, make sure to come say hello. Here's what I look like in case you've never seen my face before. Right, so first of the point changes, which you've probably already seen. The only changes were the Death Strike, Lemon Russ and Manticore. There was initially some incorrect reporting across the interwebs, including myself saying the Bane Wolf and Bane Blade had also changed. But having compared the 2 Militarum field manuals, these 3 are the only Astra Militarum units to experience change. The Death Strike dropped by 30 points to 120, which is lovely but pointless given its rules are completely crap in a game where only you play 5 turns. I do think that once our new codex comes out, it'll be ridiculously boosted. It feels like every new codex been released of late is getting more and more powerful. And if the Tau Hammerhead is anything to go off, this once per game intercontinental ballistic missile will probably be dishing out never-ending mortal wounds. Let's wait and see. Next is the Manticore increasing by 10 points to 155. Puzzling why any Astra Militarum units are becoming more expensive, but thankfully not a large increase. Given most army lists are taking 2 Manticores with full payload, this means you need to be cutting 20 points from your army list. This now takes me on to Lemon Russ, dropping by 10 points to 130 points without war gear. I've explored in other videos comparing the point cost per shot, taking into account the differing ballistic skill on Lemon Russ and tank commanders. My math hammer still shows the tank commander is the better value per shot of the 2, before even factoring its improved vehicle orders. So keeping those point changes in mind, let's now turn to the new Strike Force missions. By now you'll know that the primary objectives have changed, now capturing what were the mission's secondary objectives as a progressive primary objective. You score 4, 8 and 12 points for the primary instead of 5, 10 and 15. And the progressive objective contributes victory points to the maximum 45 you can score for primaries. Having played several new missions, I'm in favour of this, as it seems to possibly even things out a bit, in the sense that you could be scoring low on the primary objectives, given your opponent may have got the first turn and already holding more objectives. Astra Militarum are fantastic at securing objectives, but typically struggle to hold them, so I think this benefits us. For example, Mission 32, Death and Zeal, adds a progressive direct assault, rewarding 2 or 3 victory points if you secure an objective you didn't hold at the start of the turn, and or destroying an enemy unit that held an objective that turn. I've often struggled with this mission given how quickly your opponent can be upon you with the short distance between deployment zones. This new progressive would allow you to completely focus on holding only 2 objectives and destroy enemy units holding another. This would still reward you 10 victory points for that turn, giving you hold 2 primaries, giving you 8 victory points, and a further 2 victory points for destroying enemy units holding an objective. You would simply blanket one enemy unit with the Manticores or Mortars if you'd taken them, using either the Cadetagent Regimental Doctrine with Sergeant Harker, nestled in the artillery car park, giving all units nearby a reroll hit rolls of 1, or the Cadian Doctrine with the organic rerolls. Another change in the missions is the increased mention of the objective secured rule. In missions 12, tear down their icons, and 13, being data scry salvage, having objective secured units to defuse explosives as part of the progressive detonation, or securing and continuing to hold an objective despite not having any units on it is achieved by objective secured units. Guard have an advantage thanks to our cheap and cheerful troop choices of conscripts, infantry squads and scion squads. Also, several of the new missions require a bit more interaction by units, with actions being performed. These 2 same missions and also the mission 23, the Scouring, require actions to be performed as part of the progressive objective. Here it's way better to be using 55-point infantry squads for this type of thing, rather than 135-point 3-man custodian squad, or a 100-point intercessor squad, or a 90-point orc boys mob. Your opponent in these examples will have to weigh up scoring an additional 2 or 3 victory points, as opposed to utilising other abilities of that unit. Another consideration is a new condition in Mission 11, Recover the Relic. Here you only receive an additional CP in your command phase if you hold an objective in no man's land. This should only really be a problem in turn 1, with you having no units obviously deployed outside your deployment zone. Here having infiltrators, or in our case scout sentinels, will be beneficial. Depending on the terrain layout, a sentinel could be safely sitting on an objective, meaning you're getting that additional CP in turn 1. Given how pants we are in the meta, every bit counts, so you want that additional CP from the start. And one last observation on the new missions is Tighter Convictions number 31. It's just how close the objective markers are together. I expect this one to be a melee army's dream, with only about 12-ish inches between the objectives in no man's land. Given our best melee units are Bolgrams, who either do fantastic or terribly, this may be a tough mission. Here do you give up the central objective, fortifying your home objective and the outlying objective nearest our deployment zone. You will be outscored in the first 2 turns, but then you could then clear away enemy units holding the outlying objective with the manticores, and then grab shoot some scions to steal that objective. If you've played this mission, do let me know. I'd love to hear how you went. Right, now onto the secondary objectives. There have been some changes, and here are those that I think warrant consideration by an Astra Militarum player. We now have a dedicated secondary under Purge Enemy called For the Emperor, rewarding a victory point for each destroyed enemy unit. This could be a fantastic one depending on your opponent's list. Simply count the total number of enemy units, and if they have at least 12 units, it could be a good choice. Remember that in this example, you would need to kill all 12 units to receive 12 victory points. Bringer Down has changed slightly, with 10 wound vehicles now rewarding 2 victory points as opposed to 1 before, so only really affecting Chimera transports. And No Prisoners has also been boosted, awarding additional points for killing more wounds. So the victory points Astra Militarum army list to give away won't really change, but I do think in the majority of cases we'll always give away at least one of these secondaries. I have however modified my army list to make Assassinate harder to achieve for my opponent, as I believe scoring maximum points on Assassinate is easier than points to get maximum on Bring It Down or No Prisoners. Under Warcraft, I also believe Psychic Interrogation is now worth consideration for Astra Militarum. This now doesn't require line of sight and 24 inches away, so you could be very smart with an Astropath or Inquisitor. Wait to see where your opponent deploys their characters and mirror your Psyker's deployment. Given the max distance between deployment zones is about 24 inches, you should always be scoring this from turn 2. Of course, if you're up against something like Thousand Suns or Grey Knights, don't take this one, as they could probably super deny you. Now, Shadow Operations sees change to deploy teleport homers. This crucially benefits troop units, with the action being completed at the end of your turn as opposed to the end of your next command phase. I personally will probably use this a lot more, with my scions to achieve this, and going for at least 14 victory points over the maximum 12 you get for Retrieve Octaria's data. This is now called Retrieve Nukmon data, and of course if your opponent can screen out your scions, Retrieve Nukmon data will still be their go-to option. The changes to this action base of secondary don't affect Astra Militarum, giving all troop units have at least 5 or more models. It is however good to keep this in mind. If for example you're playing a Space Marine opponent who has taken a lot of 5-man troop units, you could kill off 1 or 2 models per squad, and then present risk that the action could actually fail for them. And lastly, Engage All Fronts has changed in that in order to be in a tablet quarter, the unit must have at least 3 models or be a vehicle or monster. Again, this won't really impact Astra Militarum, but could be an issue in later stages of the game when infantry squads have been whittled down to 1 or 2 models. It may also mean that a lot of single model units may start to become more redundant. An example I can think to support this is Sly Marbo. I desperately want to include him in a list, but given I usually always go for Engage All Fronts, he isn't helpful. His rules don't benefit other Astra Militarum units, so unfortunately will continue to sit in my drawer looking badass. So in summary, I'm a fan of the new missions, and think they may play a little bit better for Astra Militarum. Key units I think that will become more important are Scout Sentinels due to their pre-game movement, and Scions thanks to their grab shoot rule. As I've said in other videos, you will need to think very carefully about which secondaries you're going for. We are bottom meta, so winning matches will come down to very thorough planning. Right, so there you have it, my initial thoughts on Chapter Approved 2022. What has been your experience so far? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you want to support the channel, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, joining my Patreon Platoon, or via YouTube Super Thanks. Patreon Platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Lieutenant Mitchell, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Brady, O'Dell, Gilliam, Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Witten, Guardsman Combs, Glenn, Hills, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript Craft,